The signal was green, but the dog standing on the tracks knew it was lying. At 5:18 on a rain-dark morning, Blue Ridge Freight 417 rounds the eastern bend above Bellwether, West Virginia, pulling 28 loaded cars through a valley still buried beneath dawn fog. Inside the lead locomotive, engineer Frank Dalton watches the twin rails emerge beneath the headlight in brief silver flashes. He has driven this route for 31 years. He knows every crossing, every leaning pine, every place where the mountain wind pushes mist across the line. This morning should be ordinary. The storm has passed. Dispatch reports no obstructions. The signal ahead burns a steady green. Then something moves in the center of the track. At first, Frank thinks it is a piece of black canvas caught on a tie. The shape rises. Two ears stand against the white fog. A German shepherd faces the locomotive from between the rails. The dog is large, dark along the back, with a sable chest touched by the beam of the engine. It does not wander. It does not sniff the gravel or turn in confusion. It stands squarely on the track as though it has chosen that exact place and intends to hold it. Frank leans toward the windshield. "Come on, boy," he whispers, though the animal is nearly half a mile away and cannot hear him over the deep mechanical thunder rolling through the valley. He presses the horn. Its call tears across the sleeping town, low and enormous, shaking rainwater from the branches beside the line. The dog does not move. Frank's hand tightens around the control stand. Beside him, conductor Ray Mills lowers his paper cup of coffee. "You seeing that?" Frank does not answer. He sounds the horn again. The German shepherd lifts its head, amber eyes reflecting the locomotive's light, but it does not step away. There is no panic in its posture, no confusion. Its front paws are planted on one wooden tie, its shoulders held still, its gaze fixed not on the train but on the man inside it. Frank has seen deer freeze in headlights. He has seen cattle slip through broken fencing and stand dumbly beside the rails. This is different. The animal is not trapped. The gravel shoulder lies open on both sides. One leap would carry it clear. Yet the dog remains, breath rising like smoke from its muzzle. The train moves at 43 miles per hour. At this distance, even an emergency stop will take longer than most people understand. Steel does not stop because a man wishes it to. Weight carries its own stubborn memory. Frank glances at the speedometer, then at the green signal ahead. Clear track, clear route. No warning from dispatch. No red light. No radio call. Everything built by human hands tells him to keep moving. Only the dog says otherwise. Then another figure appears behind it. A man breaks through the fog along the west shoulder, running hard beside the rails. He wears an olive field jacket over a gray shirt, jeans darkened at the knees by wet grass, and old military boots that strike the ballast with uneven force. He is tall and broad-shouldered, but one leg seems to resist him, as though it remembers an injury the rest of his body has learned to hide. He shouts something Frank cannot hear. The wind carries the sound away beneath the locomotive's horn. The man reaches for the dog. The shepherd turns his head once, acknowledges him, then faces the train again. The man grabs the animal's collar and pulls. The dog lowers its weight. Its paws slide less than an inch across the damp wood, then lock again. "Get him off," Ray says, his voice suddenly thin. "Frank, get them off the track." Frank presses the horn a third time. The valley answers with a fading echo. Porch lights blink on below. Somewhere beyond the trees, a church bell marks the quarter hour, soft and distant beneath the growl of the engine. The running man releases the collar. For one terrible second, Frank thinks he has given up. Instead, the stranger steps between the rails beside the dog. He turns toward the locomotive, raises both arms, and crosses them sharply above his head. Frank's breath catches. He knows that signal. His son used it years ago during Marine field exercises. A simple warning made when radios failed and words could not carry. "Danger ahead. Stop now." The man repeats it, slower this time. His face comes into view beneath the headlight, pale beneath the cold, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on Frank with the calm desperation of someone who is not guessing. The dog remains beside him, silent as stone. Ray reaches for the radio. "Dispatch, Blue Ridge 417. We have 2 on the track east of Bellwether." "Repeat, 2 on the track." Static crackles, then a tired voice answers. 417, signal system shows clear. No maintenance crews authorized in your block. Frank looks past the man and the dog. The rails disappear into thick fog toward Black Creek Bridge. He sees no fallen tree, no stalled truck, no broken rail, nothing. Yet the shepherd is not looking at the train anymore. Its ears angle toward the bridge. Its head tilts slightly, listening to something buried beneath the horn, beneath the engine, beneath the waking sounds of the town. The man follows the dog's gaze, then looks back at Frank and strikes one closed fist against his chest before pointing urgently into the fog. The gesture is small, almost lost in the distance, but Frank understands its meaning. Trust me, the locomotive is less than a quarter-mile away now. The green signal continues to shine. The radio continues to insist the route is safe. Frank can feel the familiar vibration of the rails through the floor beneath his boots, steady and powerful, carrying hundreds of tons toward a dog that refuses to move and a Marine willing to stand beside him. Ray says his name once. Frank. No instruction follows. None is needed. Frank Dalton looks at the green light, then at the German shepherd standing in its path. For the first time in 31 years, he chooses to believe the animal. His hand closes around the emergency brake. 33 minutes earlier, the town of Bellwether is still asleep beneath the last weight of the storm. Rainwater slips from the eaves of narrow houses and gathers in the gutters along Mercer Street, carrying pine needles, red clay, and the faint rainbow sheen of oil washed down from the highway. Beyond the rooftops, the Appalachian hills rise like dark shoulders beneath a ceiling of fog. Nothing moves except the swollen creek and the thin white mist drifting above it. Inside a weathered two-story house near the eastern edge of town, Staff Sergeant Owen Mercer sits awake at his kitchen table. A cup of coffee cools between his hands. He has not taken a drink in several minutes. Sleep has become an unreliable visitor since he returned from overseas, arriving late, leaving early, and sometimes never crossing the door at all. At 38, Owen still carries the shape of a United States Marine. His shoulders remain broad beneath a faded gray shirt. His brown hair is cut close, though not as precisely as it once was, and a pale line near his right eyebrow catches the weak light above the stove. His eyes are blue-gray, steady even when tired. On the table beside his coffee lies a small silver dog tag on a broken chain. The name pressed into the metal has been softened by years beneath Owen's thumb. He touches it whenever the house becomes too quiet. Across the room, Atlas sleeps near the back door. The 7-year-old German shepherd lies with his head between his paws, sable coat rising and falling in a slow rhythm. A darker line of fur runs along his spine, almost black in the dim kitchen. One ear is folded slightly to the side, relaxed but never fully at rest. Even in sleep, Atlas listens. Owen glances toward him and manages the beginning of a smile. At least one of us knows how to rest, he says softly. Atlas does not move. The refrigerator hums. Water ticks against the window. Somewhere in the distance, a freight engine gives a low call from the rail yard 5 miles east, its voice rolling through the valley and fading beneath the hills. Owen turns the dog tag over. Then Atlas opens his eyes. There is no bark, no sudden jump. His amber gaze simply sharpens, as if someone has spoken his name from another room. He lifts his head and holds it still. Owen notices, but says nothing. Atlas rises and places one front paw against the wooden floor. Once, twice, 3 times. Each touch is deliberate. Between them, he waits. The old boards beneath the table answer with a vibration too faint to hear, but strong enough to stir the surface of Owen's coffee. A small circle travels across the dark liquid and disappears. Owen looks down. Train, he murmurs. The morning freight often sends tremors through the older houses. Near the line, Atlas knows that sound. He has heard it hundreds of times. But the dog is not looking toward the eastern rail yard. His head turns west, toward Black Creek Bridge and the wooded slope beyond town. He walks to the back door and presses his nose against the seam. Owen watches the muscles tighten along the shepherd's shoulders. What is it? Atlas scratches once. Not frantically, not asking to go outside. It is the old signal he used during service when he detected something Owen could not yet see. Owen's hand closes around the dog tag. For a moment, the kitchen disappears. He remembers a dry road beneath a white sky, Atlas refusing to advance, another voice ordering the team forward, and Owen choosing rank over instinct. He remembers the silence afterward most of all. Memory passes through him like cold air beneath a door. He stands. All right. Atlas steps back as Owen unlocks the deadbolt. The moment the door opens, the dog moves onto the porch. Cold mist folds around him. He does not stop to inspect the yard or lift his nose toward the familiar scents of wet cedar and chimney smoke. He crosses the grass with purpose, pauses near the rear fence, and lowers his head until one ear nearly touches the ground. Owen follows without a jacket, his boots unlaced. Atlas. The shepherd freezes. Beneath the ordinary sounds of morning, something trembles through the earth. It is not the regular pulse of an approaching train. This rhythm is broken. 3 faint movements. A pause. Then 3 more. Atlas looks toward the wooded path leading uphill. His breath clouds in front of him. Owen feels nothing through the soles of his boots, but he knows that expression. The dog has found a question and will not leave until it is answered. Owen reaches for the old leather collar. We are not running into the woods before sunrise. Atlas turns away before his fingers arrive. He slips through a loose section of fence and starts up the muddy path. Atlas heel. The command carries the firmness of years, but the dog does not obey. He quickens his pace. Owen returns inside only long enough to take his olive field jacket from a hook and push the dog tag into its pocket. By the time he reaches the path again, Atlas is already a dark shape moving through the fog. Owen follows, favoring his left leg as the cold settles into an old service injury. Wet branches brush his sleeves. Mud pulls at his boots. Ahead, Atlas appears and disappears between the trees, always close enough to be seen, never close enough to be caught. The trail climbs toward the railroad grate. With every step, the faint vibration grows stronger. Soon Owen feels it through the ground, not steady like wheels, but uneven, almost intentional. Atlas stops at the top of the slope where the trees open onto the tracks. The rails stretch east and west, silver with rain. The signal beyond the bend shines green through the mist. Owen exhales. There is nothing here. Atlas steps onto the gravel, places one paw against the nearest rail, and listens. Then, from far down the valley, a locomotive horn sounds. Atlas lifts his head and walks directly toward the center of the track. Owen steps onto the gravel after him, the cold rail shining beside his boots. Atlas, come back. The German shepherd stops between the tracks, but does not turn. His ears remain pointed toward the western fog, where Black Creek Bridge lies hidden beyond the bend. Another low horn rolls through the valley. It is closer now. Owen moves forward, one careful step at a time, his left leg stiff from the climb. You heard a train. That is all. Atlas lowers his head and presses one paw against the wooden tie. Once, twice, 3 times. Then he waits. The broken rhythm travels through the steel again, too faint for Owen to hear clearly, yet strong enough to make the dog's whiskers tremble. Owen reaches for the collar, but his hand stops inches away. He has seen Atlas stand like this before. Not in Bellwether. Not beneath wet Appalachian trees. In another place, beneath a hard white sky where the air smelled of dust, hot metal, and diesel fuel. Years earlier, Atlas had been younger, faster, and almost impossible to tire. Owen had been a staff sergeant with a full team behind him and a radio filled with voices that expected certainty. They were moving along a narrow service road before sunrise when Atlas suddenly stopped. No bark, no growl. He simply locked his legs and stared at the ground ahead. Owen had trusted that silence. His commanding officer had not. The route was cleared, the man had said. Keep moving. Owen remembered looking down at Atlas. The dog's amber eyes had held the same steady warning he carried now. But rank had spoken, and Owen had obeyed. He gave the command to advance. The danger that followed did not arrive with a dramatic warning. It came as confusion, dust, shouting, and the sudden end of an ordinary morning. No one died, but Corporal Daniel Hayes never returned to duty. The injury changed the way he walked, the work he could do, and the future he had imagined waiting at home. Owen visited him through months of recovery. Daniel never blamed him. That kindness became heavier than anger would have been. On the day Daniel left the hospital, he placed one of his dog tags in Owen's hand. Next time the dog stops, he said, you stop too. Owen had carried it ever since. Now the tag rests inside his jacket pocket, cold against his chest as though the past has reached across the years to touch him. Atlas shifts his weight. The train horn sounds again, louder and sharper. Owen looks east. A pale glow begins to gather behind the curve, faint at first, then steady. The freight is coming. The signal beside the line remains green. Everything visible says the track is clear. Everything Owen remembers says the dog is not wrong. He pulls the tag from his pocket and closes his fist around it. Rainwater slips from his hair and runs along his cheek. "I remember," he whispers. Atlas glances back at him. The look lasts only a second, but it is enough. Owen sees no fear there, only purpose. He steps between the rails and studies the line ahead. The fog hides the bridge, the creek, and the slope beneath it. He sees no fallen tree, no broken machinery, no person calling for help. Yet the strange pattern continues beneath the steel. 3 faint pulses. Silence. 3 more. Atlas turns west, then east toward the approaching train, measuring both dangers in a way no instrument can explain. Owen grips the collar and pulls. "We need to move." Atlas resists. His paws slide across the wet tie, but he lowers his body and returns to the same place. Owen tries again, harder this time. The dog twists free, moves 10 feet farther along the track, and lies down. His chest rests between the rails. His eyes face the oncoming light. The locomotive rounds the distant curve, its headlamp cutting a bright tunnel through the gray. Owen can now hear the steady thunder of wheels beneath the horn. He looks at the green signal. He looks at Atlas. For years, Owen has replayed one decision, wishing he had been brave enough to distrust what every human voice called safe. This morning has given him no certainty, only another choice. He releases the dog's collar. "Not again," he says. Owen steps beside Atlas, raises both arms above his head, and begins signaling the engineer to stop. The horn strikes the valley again, so close now that the sound seems to pass through Owen's ribs. Fog folds around the locomotive's headlight as it rounds the curve, a white beam moving through the gray like something searching for a way home. Owen keeps both arms raised. His boots slip on the wet ties, but he does not step aside. Atlas remains low between the rails, silent, his dark back glistening with rain. The signal beyond them still shines green. It is calm, steady, almost beautiful. That is what frightens Owen most. A warning should look like danger. It should flash red, scream through a radio, or arrive with a voice that leaves no room for doubt. This one comes through a dog who cannot explain himself and a vibration too small for human senses. Owen turns toward the western bend. Nothing moves inside the fog. The steel line disappears toward Black Creek Bridge, and for a moment, he wonders whether memory has made him reckless. Perhaps Atlas is confused by the storm. Perhaps the strange rhythm beneath the rails is only loose metal or water striking a support beam. Perhaps Owen has carried Daniel Hayes's dog tag for so long that he now sees old failures in every uncertain morning. Then Atlas rises. He does not face the locomotive. He walks 3 steps west, places one paw on the rail, and lowers his muzzle until it nearly touches the steel. His ears shift. Forward. The pattern comes again. 3 faint pulses. A pause. 3 more. Atlas looks back at Owen, then toward the hidden bridge. Owen understands only one thing with certainty. The dog is not trying to save himself. He is trying to stop whatever is moving toward that fog. Owen reaches for him again. Atlas, off the track. The command is sharp, trained, familiar. Atlas obeys halfway. He steps onto the gravel shoulder, waits until Owen follows, then immediately circles behind him and returns to the center line. He lies down once more, chest against the wet wood. Owen exhales through clenched teeth. "You stubborn old soldier." Atlas watches the approaching engine without blinking. The rails begin to hum beneath them. Owen can feel the vibration now, stronger with every second, climbing through the soles of his boots and into his injured leg. The pain is deep and cold, but it gives him something solid to hold on to. He pulls Atlas by the collar with both hands. The dog's paws slide, leaving dark streaks across the tie. For 1 second, Owen moves him clear. Then Atlas twists gently from his grip, not fighting him, only refusing the direction, and returns to the same place. Owen stares at him. There is no panic in the dog's breathing, no wildness in his eyes, only that quiet certainty Owen once failed to honor. The locomotive is less than half a mile away. Its horn sounds twice in quick warning. Owen can now see the outline of the cab behind the headlight. He raises his arms again and crosses them above his head. "Stop." Danger ahead. The gesture feels small against the size of the train. He repeats it. Stop. Danger ahead. Atlas rises beside him, shoulders squared, tail low. The two of them stand together between the rails while the green signal burns behind them. Owen hears a distant radio voice carried from the locomotive, broken by static and wind. He cannot make out the words. He does not need to. The train is not slowing yet. He looks down at Atlas. Rain gathers along the dog's muzzle and falls in slow drops to the wood. I am listening this time, Owen says. Atlas turns his head toward him. The moment is brief, but something passes between them that does not require command or praise. Owen removes Daniel's dog tag from his pocket and closes it in his fist. The thin chain wraps around his knuckles. He remembers Daniel in the hospital doorway years ago, learning to walk again with a patient smile, telling Owen that trust sometimes arrives without proof. The memory no longer feels like punishment. It feels like an instruction finally understood. The engine bears down through the fog. Owen steps forward and waves both arms wider. He points toward Black Creek Bridge, strikes his fist against his chest, and points again. Trust me. The man behind the windshield leans forward. Owen can see him now, an older engineer with silver at his temples and one hand hovering above the controls. For a terrible second, nothing changes. The locomotive keeps coming. The horn fills the valley. Atlas does not move. Then the engineer's hand drops. A hard metallic cry rises beneath the engine. The wheels begin to resist the rails. Owen hears the sound of steel fighting weight, distance, and momentum. The train is finally trying to stop. Steel screams beneath the locomotive as Frank pulls the emergency brake with both hands. The sound cuts through bellwether like a warning no one can ignore. Wheels lock against wet rail. The engine shudders. 28 loaded cars push from behind with the slow, merciless force of a moving mountain. Coffee spills across the control stand. Ray grabs the edge of his seat and calls into the radio. Emergency stop east of Bellwether. 2 people on the track. Hold all traffic. Dispatch answers through static. Blue Ridge 417, your block still shows clear. Confirm obstruction. Frank stares through the windshield. Owen and Atlas stand inside the beam, growing larger with every second. I am looking at it, Frank says. The horn sounds again. Owen turns toward the German shepherd and reaches for his collar, but Atlas steps west instead of leaving the rails. The dog looks toward the hidden bridge, then back at the train, as though measuring the distance that remains. Frank knows the numbers without calculating them. Speed. Weight. Grade. Rain. Every fact says the locomotive needs more track than it has. Move, he whispers. Owen cannot hear him. The Marine bends, wraps one arm beneath Atlas's chest, and tries to lift him. Atlas resists for one final heartbeat, eyes fixed on the fog beyond Black Creek. Then he allows Owen to pull him toward the gravel shoulder. Owen's injured leg gives slightly beneath the dog's weight. He catches himself, half carrying and half guiding Atlas clear. The locomotive bears down. The headlight fills the morning. Owen presses his body over the shepherd beside the track as wind and mist strike them. Frank holds the brake as if strength can shorten distance. Steel cries. Couplings slam through the line of freight cars, one after another, like doors closing down a long corridor. The engine passes the place where Atlas had been standing and continues another 100 feet. Then 50. Then 20. At last, with a deep mechanical groan, Blue Ridge 417 stops. Silence does not return at once. Metal ticks beneath the locomotive. Air releases from the brake system in long breaths. Somewhere down the line, a loose coupling knocks once and settles. Frank remains seated, both hands on the controls, listening to his own heartbeat. Ray looks through the side window. They are clear. Frank closes his eyes for 1 second. When he opens them, the signal ahead is still green. It shines through the fog with the same calm certainty it held before, untouched by what almost happened beneath it. Frank takes the radio. Dispatch, we are stopped. Send local authorities and track maintenance. What is the obstruction? The operator asks. Frank looks toward Owen, who is rising beside Atlas. I do not know yet. He sets the radio down and climbs from the cab. Cold air meets him on the steps. His boots land on wet gravel. Ray follows, pulling on his jacket. Owen stands about 30 feet behind the locomotive, one hand resting on Atlas's shoulders. The Marine's face is pale with effort, but his gaze remains steady. Frank walks toward him, anger arriving only after fear has somewhere to go. Do you understand what you just did? Owen nods once. Yes. You stood in front of a freight train on a green signal. The signal is wrong. Frank points toward it. That system is checked every day. Owen looks at Atlas. So is he. Ray approaches from behind Frank. There is nothing on the track ahead. No vehicle. No fallen tree. The fog hides the bridge, but the rails between them appear unbroken. Frank turns toward the dog. Atlas is not trembling. He is not seeking comfort. He steps away from Owen and walks to the nearest rail. He places one paw against the steel and becomes perfectly still. Frank exhales sharply. Get him away from there. Owen does not move. Watch. Atlas lowers his head. His ears angle west. For several seconds there is only dripping water and the distant murmur of Black Creek. Then a faint metallic tap travels through the rail. Frank almost dismisses it as cooling steel. Another tap follows. Then a third. Silence. 3 more taps answer from somewhere beyond the fog. Ray's expression changes. That is not the train. Atlas lifts his paw and walks west. He stops after several yards, looks back at the men, and waits. Owen follows without hesitation. Frank glances toward the green signal, then toward his locomotive. Dispatch calls again through the open cab radio, ordering him to explain the stop. He does not answer. Atlas touches the rail once more. The pattern returns, weak but deliberate. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps. Frank has spent 31 years listening to steel, and steel does not speak that way by accident. He steps after Owen. Ray follows close behind. Ahead of them, Atlas disappears into the fog leading toward Black Creek Bridge, where something unseen is still trying to be heard. Atlas moves through the fog with the measured certainty of a dog, following something no human can sense. Owen stays close behind him, one hand brushing the wet branches that lean over the rail bed. Frank and Ray follow several yards back, their boots grinding against the gravel. The farther they walk from the locomotive, the quieter the morning becomes. The engine idles behind them like distant thunder, its headlight fading into a pale circle in the mist. Ahead, Black Creek Bridge emerges one piece at a time. First the steel rails, then the dark wooden ties, then the narrow guard walkway running beside them. From where the men stand, nothing appears broken. The bridge still spans the creek. The signal remains green. Water rushes beneath it, swollen from the storm but contained between the banks. Frank looks along the track and feels his doubt return. There is no obstruction, he says. The rails are straight. The bridge is standing. Ray kneels near one of the ties and runs his hand over the damp wood. No washout here. Owen does not answer. Atlas has stopped at the eastern edge of the bridge. He places his paw against the left rail and listens. The metallic tapping comes again. It is weaker now, almost lost beneath the sound of the creek. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. Frank looks toward the bridge supports. Could be loose hardware. Owen shakes his head. Loose hardware does not wait between patterns. The radio clipped to Ray's coat crackles. Dispatch calls for an update. Ray raises it. Blue Ridge 417 is stopped east of Black Creek. No visible obstruction at this time. The reply comes quickly. If the track is clear, resume movement at restricted speed. Maintenance can inspect after passage. Frank looks toward the train, then back at Atlas. For most of his career, those words would have ended the discussion. Orders had a shape. Procedures had a sequence. The railroad worked because every person trusted the system to carry information farther and faster than instinct ever could. Yet the green signal now feels less like reassurance and more like a question no one has answered. Tell them to hold, Frank says. Ray lowers the radio. They are not going to like that. They do not have to like it. Atlas steps onto the bridge. Owen catches the rear of his collar. Slow. The dog does not pull. He advances one tie at a time, pausing after every few feet to press his paw against the rail. Fog drifts upward from the creek and curls around his legs. The bridge is slick beneath him. Owen follows along the walkway, testing each board before placing his weight. Frank and Ray remain near the entrance. Mercer, Frank calls, using the name printed on the small service patch sewn above Owen's jacket pocket. Do not go farther until maintenance gets here. Owen glances back. Someone is still tapping. You do not know that. Atlas stops suddenly. His head turns toward the right side of the bridge. He looks down. The tapping sounds again, but this time it is followed by something softer. A scrape, then a faint human voice carried upward through the beams. Owen freezes. "Hello," he calls. The creak answers first, rushing over stone. Then the voice comes again, thin and strained but unmistakable. "Up here." Frank steps closer. "Where are you?" No answer follows. Atlas moves toward a narrow service platform attached beneath the outer rail. A bent metal sign reads, "Authorized personnel only." The access ladder is partly hidden by brush and fog. Owen kneels beside the edge, holding the collar firmly. Atlas lowers his head and lets out a quiet whine. It is the first sound he has made since leaving the house. Frank's expression changes. "There is a maintenance alcove under the bridge," he says. "It is used during inspections." Ray shines a flashlight through the beams. The light catches wet steel, tangled branches, and a yellow safety vest below. "I see someone." Owen grips the railing. "Can you hear me?" The voice answers after several seconds. "Yes." "Are you hurt?" "No. Just trapped." Relief moves through the men, but it does not last. The person below coughs, gathers breath, and speaks again. "My name is Walter Briggs. Track inspector." Frank recognizes the name. Walter has worked this section longer than most of the current crew. "Walter, what happened?" "The storm took the lower access stairs. My radio went into the creek. I have been striking the support rail with a wrench." Atlas stares down through the beams, ears forward. Walter continues, each word slower than the last. "You stopped the freight?" Frank steps onto the first tie. "Yes. We are coming down to get you." "No," Walter says, his voice suddenly sharper. "Do not bring that train any closer." The four men fall silent. Beneath them, Black Creek pushes hard against the bridge supports. Walter strikes the steel once, not as a plea now, but as a warning. "The bridge is still standing," Frank says. "From below?" Walter answers. "Only from where you are looking." Frank lowers himself beside the service ladder and peers through the wet beams. Walter Briggs is wedged inside a narrow maintenance alcove about 12 feet below the track, one shoulder pressed against a steel support and both boots braced above the rushing creek. His yellow safety vest is dark with rain. A silver wrench rests in his right hand. Every few seconds, water strikes the underside of the bridge with a hollow sound that seems to travel through the entire structure. "The eastern support lost its foundation," Walter calls. "The storm cut beneath it sometime after midnight. The rail bed above still looks level, but there is almost nothing holding the weight underneath." Frank studies the ties beneath his boots. They appear solid. That ordinary appearance makes Walter's warning harder to accept and more frightening at the same time. "How much of the support is gone?" Frank asks. Walter tilts his head toward the fog downstream. "Enough that one loaded engine could finish what the creek started." Ray immediately raises the radio. "Dispatch, this is Blue Ridge 417. Black Creek Bridge may be structurally compromised. Lock the block in both directions and contact County Emergency Services." Static answers first. Then the operator asks him to repeat the report. Ray does, slower and louder. Owen remains beside the railing with one hand on Atlas's collar. The dog stares into the alcove, his body tense but controlled. Walter looks up through the beams. "Was that shepherd the one who found me?" Owen nods. "He heard your wrench through the rail." Walter gives a tired laugh. "I have been hitting that steel for nearly an hour. I thought the creek was swallowing every sound." Atlas lets out a soft breath and leans farther toward the opening. Owen feels the dog's weight shift and tightens his grip. "Easy. We know where he is now." Frank finds the upper end of the maintenance ladder. 2 lower rungs are missing, and the narrow platform beneath Walter has twisted away from the main support. Climbing down without safety equipment would place another person in danger. Ray opens a storage box beside the bridge entrance and pulls out a coil of inspection rope, but the line is too short to reach the creek bank below. "There should be emergency gear in the locomotive," Frank says. "Harness, longer rope, first aid kit." Ray starts back toward the train. Atlas watches him disappear into the fog, then turns toward the wooded slope on the north side of the bridge. His nose lifts. He pulls once against Owen's hand. "What now?" Owen asks. Atlas moves away from the tracks and follows a narrow path through mountain laurel and wet ferns. Owen stays with him. Frank calls after them, but Owen raises one hand to show that he has heard. The path descends beside the bridge, steep but stable, curving toward a lower maintenance road hidden beneath the trees. Atlas moves carefully, testing the mud before each step. Halfway down, he stops beside a fallen cedar where an old cable is looped around the trunk. Owen brushes away leaves and finds a weathered rescue line stored inside a rusted metal box. The latch has broken, but the rope remains dry beneath a folded canvas cover. "Good boy," he whispers. Atlas touches his nose to Owen's wrist, then looks back toward Walter. Minutes later, Frank and Ray secure the longer line to the upper bridge beam. County rescue crews are still on the way, but Walter's platform shifts each time the creek surges beneath it. Waiting has become its own risk. Owen fastens the spare safety harness around his waist. Frank studies his stiff left leg. "You do not have to go down." Owen tests the rope with both hands. "I am lighter than you, and Atlas will not let me leave without him." The shepherd stands at the edge, watching every movement. Owen descends slowly, boots finding the remaining rungs while Frank and Ray control the line above. The air beneath the bridge is colder. Spray from Black Creek dampens his face. Walter reaches out when Owen comes close enough, not from fear, but because the platform beneath him gives another quiet groan. "I am glad you stopped that train," Walter says. "Thank the dog when we are up." Owen clips the second safety loop around Walter's harness. "You can thank him yourself." Together, guided by Frank and Ray, they climb toward the track. Walter moves carefully, conserving what strength remains. Atlas paces above them, stopping whenever Owen pauses, ears lowered toward the opening. When Walter's hand finally reaches the top beam, Frank pulls him onto the gravel. Atlas approaches at once. Walter kneels despite his exhaustion and places both hands against the dog's face. "You heard me," he says. Atlas closes his eyes for one quiet second. Then a deep cracking sound rolls from beneath the bridge. Everyone turns. Fog shifts over Black Creek, revealing a section of the eastern support leaning farther than before. Walter rises and points toward the freight train waiting only a few hundred feet away. "Move that engine back," he says, "and wake the town. This is bigger than the bridge." The cracking beneath Black Creek Bridge fades into the roar of water, but no one mistakes it for harmless settling. Frank turns toward the locomotive. Through the thinning fog, Blue Ridge Freight 417 sits less than 300 feet from the weakened span, its engine idling. 28 loaded cars stretched eastward along the curve. Walter grips the railing and points beyond the bridge toward Bellwether. "The creek feeds the town reservoir 2 miles downstream," he says. "What are you carrying?" Frank already knows the answer, but he looks at Ray as though hoping the manifest has changed since they left the yard. Ray pulls the folded shipping papers from inside his jacket. Rain has softened the edges, yet the printed list remains clear. Several cars hold building materials and farm equipment. 6 tank cars carry industrial fuel for a processing plant west of the county line. 2 more contain water treatment chemicals used by municipal facilities across the state. Under normal conditions, the cargo is sealed, regulated, and safe. On a failing bridge above a swollen creek, it becomes something else entirely. Frank looks toward the rooftops, barely visible below the hills. Bellwether has fewer than 4,000 residents. Most are still waking, filling coffee pots, turning on showers, packing lunches, and trusting that the water beneath their streets will arrive clean. If the bridge gives way under those cars, Walter says, the creek carries everything straight through town. Ray lifts the radio. His voice is calm, but the hand holding the receiver is not. "Dispatch, declare an emergency closure for the entire Bellwether block. We need county fire, sheriff, environmental response, and railroad structural crews. The freight must reverse immediately." The operator asks for confirmation. Frank takes the radio from Ray. "This is engineer Frank Dalton. I am confirming a compromised bridge, hazardous cargo, and a direct threat to the town water supply. Lock every signal red." For several seconds, only static answers. Then the green light beside Black Creek flickers. It dims, returns, and finally changes to red. The color spreads across the wet rail like a warning arriving late. Owen looks down at Atlas. The shepherd watches the signal without interest. He had already given his warning when no light would. Frank and Ray hurry back toward the locomotive. Walter follows more slowly, supported on one side by Owen. Atlas remains close to Walter, matching his pace as though guarding the man whose faint message brought them there. Near the engine, Sheriff Emma Collins arrives in a county vehicle with emergency lights turning silently through the fog. 2 volunteer fire trucks follow her up the service road. Emma steps out wearing a tan uniform beneath a rain jacket, her gray-streaked hair pulled back, her expression alert. Frank explains the danger in fewer than 30 seconds. She does not waste one asking whether he is certain. The Lower Creek District floods first, she says. I will clear the riverside homes and close the reservoir intake. She turns to a deputy. Activate the town siren. Send alerts to every phone in the county. Tell the elementary school and nursing home to shelter uphill until we know more. A low siren begins moments later, rising from the center of Bellwether. Porch lights appear across the valley. Doors open. Families step outside and look toward the tracks, where the freight train rests in the fog like a dark wall. Frank climbs into the cab and begins the careful reverse procedure. The rear conductor confirms that the eastern track behind them is clear. Air pressure builds through the brake line. Couplings tighten one after another. The locomotive moves backward at less than 5 miles per hour, drawing each car away from the bridge with painful slowness. Owen stands beside the track with Atlas. Every wheel that retreats feels like a breath returned to the town. One tank car clears the bend. Then another. The weakened bridge groans beneath nothing heavier than rain. When the final car reaches safe ground, Frank stops the train nearly half a mile east. A railroad inspection crew arrives soon after sunrise. Engineers descend the creek bank with measuring equipment and cameras. The fog lifts as they work, exposing what had been hidden. The eastern support column has shifted several inches. Floodwater has carved a hollow beneath its base, leaving the track above suspended over washed-out earth. A cable connected to the warning sensor hangs loose among branches below. The storm had torn it free before the bridge moved. That is why the signal stayed green. The system had not detected safety. It had simply lost the ability to recognize danger. Walter stands beside Emma as the chief engineer finishes his inspection. How close? She asks. The man looks toward the waiting freight cars. One locomotive might have crossed, he says quietly. The full train would not have. No one speaks after that. The town siren falls silent. Black Creek continues beneath the bridge, brown and fast, carrying leaves instead of fuel, rainwater instead of poison. Walter kneels beside Atlas and rests a weathered hand against the dog's chest. Beneath his palm, the shepherd's heart beats with the same steady rhythm that held him on the rails. Around them, radios crackle, crews work, and Bellwether wakes to the knowledge that its ordinary morning was almost taken from it. Atlas only turns toward Owen, waiting for the next command. 3 weeks later, sunlight rests on Bellwether with the quiet patience of a town learning how close it came to losing an ordinary morning. Black Creek Bridge remains closed behind orange barriers while railroad crews replace the eastern support and rebuild the washed-out foundation with stone, steel, and concrete. The creek has returned to its banks. Children ride bicycles past the fire station. Coffee rises in warm curls behind diner windows. Faucets run clear in every home below the ridge. Nothing in Bellwether looks miraculous, and perhaps that is what makes it feel like one. At the old depot beside Mercer Street, townspeople gather beneath strings of small American flags. There is no grand stage, only a wooden platform, a few folding chairs, and a table covered with homemade pies. Sheriff Emma Collins stands near the entrance, speaking with Walter Briggs, whose yellow safety vest has been cleaned but still carries a dark mark from the bridge alcove. Frank Dalton arrives in his railroad jacket, holding something wrapped in brown cloth. Ray Mills follows with 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one for Frank, though he keeps both until Frank remembers to take his. Owen watches from the edge of the crowd. He wears the same olive field jacket he wore that morning, repaired at one sleeve where a branch tore the fabric during the climb. Atlas sits beside his left leg. The German shepherd appears unmoved by the attention around him. Children whisper his name. A woman from the bakery offers him a biscuit shaped like a train. Atlas accepts it gently, then places it on the ground without eating, as though food can wait until everyone is accounted for. Owen rests a hand between his ears. You never did care much for applause. Atlas looks up at him, amber eyes calm. When Emma steps onto the platform, the crowd grows still. She speaks briefly about the bridge, the emergency crews, and the families who helped move elderly neighbors uphill before sunrise. She thanks Walter for continuing to signal when no answer came. She thanks Frank for trusting what he saw over what the system told him. Then she looks toward Owen and Atlas. Some warnings arrive through alarms, she says. Some arrive through radios. This one arrived on 4 paws. The people around the depot smile, but Owen lowers his gaze. Praise has always made him uncomfortable. It asks him to stand inside a moment he would rather share. Atlas leans lightly against his leg, steadying him without being asked. Frank crosses the platform carrying the brown bundle. He stops in front of Owen and unwraps an old railroad signal lamp, its metal casing worn smooth by decades of weather. The glass lens is red. A fresh brass plate has been fixed beneath the handle. Frank does not read the inscription aloud. He simply places the lamp in Owen's hands. It used to hang near the eastern switch, he says. The railroad replaced it years ago. I thought it belonged with someone who understands that a warning only matters when somebody listens. Owen studies the red glass. Sunlight passes through it and stains his fingers with a soft crimson glow. He turns toward Atlas. This is not mine. Frank nods. I know. Owen sets the lamp on the platform beside the shepherd. Atlas sniffs the metal once, then sits beside it as if accepting a new post. Laughter moves gently through the crowd, not loud enough to disturb the peace of the moment. Walter steps forward and kneels with care. He places his hand against Atlas's chest, exactly where he had touched him after leaving the bridge. You heard me when no one else could, he says. Atlas lowers his head beneath the man's palm. Owen reaches into his jacket pocket. Daniel Hayes's dog tag lies there on its broken chain, the edges polished by years of guilt, memory, and prayer. He has carried it through sleepless nights, empty rooms, and every moment when the past asked him why he did not trust the warning soon enough. Today, the metal feels different. Not lighter. Nothing true becomes lighter simply because time has passed, but it no longer feels like a sentence. Owen kneels beside Atlas and removes the small ring from the dog's collar. He threads Daniel's tag onto it and closes the clasp. The silver rests against Atlas's dark fur. Owen keeps his hand there for a long moment. He told me to listen next time, he whispers. I think he would be proud of you. Atlas touches his nose to Owen's wrist. No one nearby speaks. Even the children seem to understand that silence can sometimes hold more than words. In the weeks that follow, the new bridge rises above Black Creek. When the first freight train is cleared to cross, Frank asks Owen and Atlas to stand beside the repaired line. The locomotive approaches at 10 miles per hour, horn sounding. Once beneath a blue morning sky, Atlas watches the wheels roll safely over the new supports. He does not tense. He does not step toward the rail. When the final car passes, he lies beneath the old red lamp near the depot wall and closes his eyes. Owen sits beside him, one hand resting on the collar where Daniel's tag catches the sun. Perhaps Atlas never understood signals, freight manifests, or the weight of a sleeping town below the ridge. Perhaps he understood only the oldest promise he and Owen had ever shared. Someone was in danger. Someone was calling. And this time, no one would be left behind.